More creepypastas. We are reading part 3, and I think the last of the Horrors of the Backrooms. And yeah, let's just get right into it. After looking through the classroom a bit more, I discovered an old backpack resting in the corner behind a desk. I picked it up, unzipped it, and looked through all the pouches for anything inside. There wasn't much of a note besides dust and crumbs, however. I figured it would be a useful item to have with me, so I kept it with me and returned over to the teacher's desk and grabbed the notebook and pen I had been using to document events. After which, I put them inside and set the backpack straps over my shoulders, tightening them in the event I needed to move quickly to prevent them from easily falling off. I made my way over to the door before pushing away the desks I had used as barricades. The metal legs scraping against the floor made me visibly cringe. Once they were moved aside, I approached the door, letting my face hover close to the glass as I looked out into the hallway. There were still no signs of whatever it was that had been breathing and making those footsteps, which was good. I needed to take the opportunity to get out of this room and keep moving before it came back. I took a deep breath, mentally prepared myself before I opened the door. The longer I'd stay here, the less it felt like I'd be able to escape. But I did it once, and I can do it again. That much was comforting, but not a whole lot. I opened the door, taking my first steps back out into the imitation of a school hallway. It looked no different than before until I looked to the right. Shockingly, the repetitive yellow wall area of the expanse that had led into the school lair was no longer. It was the exact same hallway I'd run down when escaping from those mercenaries. Soldiers? Whatever you call them. But instead, at the end of the hall was the blue lockers lining the walls on either side. It was just a solid, plain white wall, and it was as smooth as the wall could possibly be. I was now met with another strange element to deal with. The fact that the expanse's layout and features seemed to change periodically without any true pattern or logic. At least I think that was the case, unless I was truly losing my mind. I headed off to the left, turning down another hallway that maintained a consistent design and appearance as the one previously. Not to mention the other abandoned classrooms and even what looked to be a wore-down computer lab, with monitor screens being smashed and cracked along with some had fallen on the floor. I didn't give the lab a second glance, keeping a lookout for any computers and monitors that looked intact, enough for me to try and use. But it was nothing more than a self-amusement at that point, even if it was the only one in working order. Who to say would ever obey the rules of a computer and come back to reality? After looking around for just a few minutes, I eventually gave up and headed deeper into this school. I pretty much came to terms with calling it that, despite the obvious circumstances. Everything I had seen so far had mostly been uneventful, besides the fact of having myself on high alert in case of whatever that thing was earlier circled back around. After mindlessly wandering for several more minutes, I eventually came to a staircase leading up to a supposed second floor. The stairs themselves looked unstable and dilapidated at best, with what looked like to be rust and rot running along the walls, accompanied by cracks with what looked like to be weeds growing out of them. OSHA would have a field day with this place. Before going all in, I reached out with my right foot and placed it on the first step, half expecting it to just collapse from the minuscule amount of force. But it held, giving me just enough assurance to take another. After I felt comfortable enough to begin climbing, I heard something that made my heart skip several beats. I stopped, frozen, as I leaned forward to keep myself out of line of the side of the stairway entrance. Coming from outside the doorway, my staircase looked located with footsteps, heavy but slow and potent footsteps. But not only that, there was breathing as well, and it was just as deep and hoarse as it was unsettling. The creature was looking for me while I was hiding inside the classroom. It was coming, and there I was, just a sitting duck out in the open. I immediately started to move up the stairs as quietly as I could, skipping multiple steps and placing my feet down as lightly as humanly possible. Luckily, the padding on the bottom of my shoes was able to keep my movement on the quieter side of things, so I was able to be quick without making much noise. But I didn't feel like I was moving fast enough because every second counted. And with every one that passed, the louder the breathing and footsteps became. Part of me wasn't sure if I would be able to make it to the top in time before the creature entered the stairwell. But I kept moving, kept pushing myself because it was quite literally life or death. I was careful, making sure not to throw too much weight on any section of the stairs that looked too unstable. I kept my eyes on what was below me and cautious not to slip up. But just as the breathing had reached the doorframe, I was only on the last few steps. Just feet away from the top. I was thanking every god that I could that I was going to make it without the thing seeing me. That is, Until the very last step, I slipped, and my foot dislodged a chunk of material from it, sending it down, crashing the staircase below me, and breaking apart more and more with each step it collided with. The footsteps outside the stairwell suddenly ceased, and so did my movement. I held my breath, turning to look back down the doorway. The silence was deafening, and I didn't dare move a muscle. Not yet. The creature, whatever it was, let out a low, surprised snarl. I could hear it sniffing the air from the outside of the doorway, and that's when I seized up the opportunity to more or less throw myself up the top of the stairs. I landed as quietly as I could just before looking up to see more or less of a similar layout to the first floor. However, to my right was what looked like to be a school library. I could hear the creature as it entered the stairwell and began climbing up at moderate speed after me. So I turned and made a mad dash into the library to hide as it tailed me, still not looking at its appearance. The library itself looked just as bad and as dilapidated as the rest of the building. None of the shelves even had books, but I didn't even have time to think about it. I frantically looked around for several seconds before laying my eyes on what looked like to be the circulation desk with the office behind it. I could hear the creature was a little over halfway up the staircase, and I was running out of time to find a place to hide. I quickly made my way around the circular desk and bolted for the door to the office behind it, praying with every fiber of my being that it wouldn't be locked. I felt my hands on the knob, hearing the entity was now at the top of the stairwell. It was breathing more rapid and almost angry in nature. I turned the knob, only for the door to not budge at all. I tried again and again, finding no more success than my first desperate attempt. So I did the only thing that I could to save me from becoming a bloody smear on one of these walls. I crouched down and moved up against the desk, and the top of it was offset just enough to hide me if the beast were to peek over. Speaking of which, I heard its breathing enter as it entered the library. Its footsteps coming to a sudden stop as it seemed to sniff the air. I thought it was right there and then, that it would detect my scent and kill me right on the spot. Yet nothing came. Didn't stop my life from flashing before my eyes, though. My cheeks had gone red from holding my breath as the creature continued to stay idle and scan the library. Moments what felt like years passed, but the thing eventually lost interest, and I heard it turn and exit the library into the hallway from which it came. Although it didn't go down the stairs, not according to my ears anyway. I waited for several minutes before I even dared peek my head out into the open. Cautiously lifting myself up and over the desk to take a look around. I was alone. I was alone, or at least my eyes told me that I was, but I wasn't sure if I could even trust that at this point. I needed to keep my head on tight, though. I quickly and quietly climbed over the desk before turning to my left and found what looked to be an opening to the school gym on the opposite end of the library. And it was either that or going through the same doorway that thing just did mere minutes ago. I made the opposite choice and headed for the gym. It was, of course, dimly lit, or looked to be that way from the inside of the library. But once I crossed the doorway, I got a full scope of its appearance. It was dilapidated, just as the rest of the place was. That was expected. There were fluorescent lights hanging by a thread from the ceiling. The floor was abundantly cracked and dirty. The basketball hoops and backboards possessed only by half the glass, and they should, with the nets also being worn down and hanging halfway off the rim. It was a ridiculously large gym, so much bigger than one my school possessed. So every step I took, it made me feel like I was walking across a king-size bed. And despite the fact that I knew I was alone, I couldn't help the feeling of being watched. It made me speed up a bit, as well as taking a couple of glances around me for good measure. But I didn't hear or see anything that moved, and maybe that was the problem. I just got less than the hall halfway across the court. I came upon a certain section of the worn-down bleachers that appeared stained with mold, which led all the way up each step until it hit the wall. I took a look at the wall itself, the part that was just above the top step of the bleachers, seeing that there was something written on it what I assumed would to be blood. Don't go in the water. It only raised more questions than answers, as there wasn't a drop of actual water in sight. The ominous sentence had made me think just about how many other people had gotten stuck in this part of the expanse and were never able to tell their stories. Decided it was best to leave the bleachers alone, though. The less of my environment I involved myself with, the better. At this point, I was practically jogging towards the door. There wasn't anything pursuing, nothing I could hear or perceive in any way. But regardless of the fact, I still wanted to get the hell out of that area. I take one last look back, seeing the doors that I entered through the hallway were now connected to what looked like another dilapidated classroom. The expanse had changed its environment yet again. Part of me had pondered if it was possible or not to actually see the shifts occur. Nonetheless, I made it to the door and threw open, only to step through and look up like a mesmerized child. The time this time I found myself in a wide, massive, and empty cafeteria. It was about what you expect from a public school as far as the general decor and design. The scale of the room itself was a bit large, but not ridiculously so. It seems like every room in here was just slightly larger than it should have been. The long rectangular dining tables were strewn about, with some being upside down or flipped around in various ways. They were also beaten to hell with chunks of wood missing from some corners and sides, and that wasn't mentioning the cobwebs struggling between the seats, and yet there wasn't a single arachnid or insect to be found. The cafeteria had two hallways on either end, acting as exits. I opted for the hallway on the left, as I had seen a couple of doors that had looked ajar, but what actually led it was a mystery of the angle I was at. Everything seemed so lifeless, and yet you were always under the impression that you were not alone. There were still no windows that allowed me to see what might be on the outside of all this, although part of me wondered that if I looked out just to see nothing but a black void. It had become more than clear to me at this point that I wasn't on Earth anymore. Regardless, I made it to the opening of the hallway and immediately darted for the first door I saw. Reaching behind myself to slowly shut it as quietly as possible, the next room was probably the most normal out of everything I had seen thus far, by the standards of the expanse, anyway. It was a simple natatorium. It was bigger. It was on the bigger end of things as far as dimensions, like the rooms before it, but nothing that I hadn't seen in schools back on Earth. And it was surprisingly sterile and intact looking, not nearly as worn and torn as the rest of the building. It had it all: the white and blue tile floors, the diving boards, the lanes and the pools, and the potent smell of chlorine. Although it was a bit dimly lit, making it difficult to see what was beneath the surface of the water, however, on the edges of the pool were white rectangular signs that, on any other pool back in reality, would usually list the depths of a particular section. And this pool had those, except they didn't display numbers of any typical units of measurement. Instead, there was just the letter X painted in black ink on each one. I raised an eyebrow before shifting to the edge of the pool and peering over, the eerie silence only furthering tension that shouldn't have been present. Now, pretty much all the natatorium pools usually allow you to see at the bottom. This one didn't, not even a little bit. I sat there puzzled as I focused hard and squinted my eyes to locate the floor of the pool. But the harder I tried, the more I only saw an endless black-blue abyss. It looked to not even have a bottom at all, and if it did, it definitely wasn't anywhere near reasonably enough to swim to. And speaking of, I caught movement in the corner of my eye just as I was about to look away. It came from the closer to the right end of the pool, just about where my peripheral vision ended. The depth of the pool was consistent across the entire thing, even if you think it would have or should have been shallow. I turned my head to focus on whatever it was, and I squinted. Once again spotting the black mass slowly inching towards my end of the pool. It had to be more than 30 feet in length alone, which, with the width being around 5. 3 months ago, I would have assumed that it was seeing in that moment was nothing more than my eyes playing tricks on me. But now, now I fully accepted that there was something down here, something alive and probably dangerous. So I did the most common sense thing I could and turned around and made my way to walk right out of the natatorium. I didn't want to bother sticking around to find out any more information about whatever was swimming around down there. I didn't have the tools to do a damn thing about it anyway. But as soon as I had reached the door and put my hand on the knob, I froze. The breathing, the footsteps, I heard it again. It was right outside the door. That thing, it was back. And this time, I finally caught a glimpse of the hideous appearance through the glass in the door. The creature wasn't very tall, just under 6 feet by my estimation, but that didn't do anything to take away from the grotesque nature, not even a little. Its body shape resembled that of an overweight human, maintaining a bipedal stance as it walked. Its skin was sickly gray color, with it looking like it had been forcibly stretched over the bones and muscles of the beast. Its face possessed not a single feature, giving it the appearance of a sheet of metal. The most disturbing feature, however, was that of its two long thin appendages protruding from its shoulders that were bent at a near perfect 90-degree angle about 2 feet out. Both of them were covered in these disgusting bumps that traveled up to the length of the appendages all the way to the bent section. The creature had turned its faceless head and pointed it right at the glass in the door. Sure, it had no eyes, but I knew somehow, some way, it could see me clear as day. The breathing was still present and potent as well, despite the lack of a mouth. Everything about it was just wrong, and it was somehow even more horrific and hideous than the centipede creature. To say I was stuck between a rock and a hard place wasn't a stretch. My heartbeat skyrocketed as I thought of what to do. But it wouldn't matter all that much, and I had taken too long to act, and it was going to cost me dearly if I didn't find a way out. The beast started moving towards the door, reaching out with those bumpy shoulder legs in order to presumably break it down. I quickly backed up and looked to my left, spotting a lone broom that was laid up against the wall. The creature began to pound on the door with its horrid limbs, and the hinges grew weaker with every blow, which meant my time was running out, and there wasn't anywhere to hide this time. I darted over to the broom, swiping it away from the wall and breaking the handle over my knee to leave one edge sharp. After which I gripped the blunt end with my shaky fingers and held it behind my neck in a stance of a baseball batter. I didn't expect myself to be able to kill this thing, not even close, but if I lured an end, swung at it, and kept it from grabbing me long enough to where I could run around the exit the room, then that would be enough. It was all about whatever I had to do to survive at this point. The creature delivered several more devastating bangs to the door, the last one which finally threw it right off the frame and off its hinges, causing it to slide across the floor and into the pool, a small splash manifesting before it sank into the depths. The creature then raised those shoulder appendages as if it were to tell me it was about to charge, which it did, violently dashing forward at the surprising speed considering its previous movements and patterns. I evaded the beast by strafing to the left, my heart going a mile a minute as I worked up the courage to take a swing at it, landing a harsh blow on the back of its head. The beast retaliated by shooting out its left shoulder appendage straight for my head. I backed up so fast that I nearly slipped and fell as I raised the broom handle to block the attack. It then lunged with its other appendage, so I stepped aside to the right and swung the handle down hard on the limb. Hard enough to burst and draw blood from one of the bumps, the liquid itself was gooey and thick, a light gray color that seeped out from the supposed wound I had created. But this little stunt only angered the creature far beyond whatever point I was already at. It turned and charged with its entire mass again, catching me off guard and throwing me off my feet with a powerful impact into the pool. It happened so fast I didn't fully comprehend it until I was already several feet underwater, having no time to take a breath or prepare myself. From what I saw when I opened my eyes, the creature itself didn't follow or fall in with me, but the water itself was surprisingly warm. But that wasn't even close enough to make me feel comfortable in my current predicament. I looked down in the black abyss, staring right back up at me as I stared down at it. I could barely see my own feet as they were swallowed up by the immediate darkness below me. It was haunting and disorienting, like looking into a giant sinkhole. But unlike the abyss, sinkholes were at least somewhat understood. My lungs began to throb, but I was hesitant to swim up, knowing the beast would have been waiting for me at the top. But at least I had a chance against that thing. Drowning? Not so much. I did manage to hold on to the broom handle, though. Nonetheless, I quickly made my decision once I looked down to the right side of the pool and saw more movement in the water that was below me. This time I could make out more of its shape and resembled that of a serpent, but there almost weren't any details that I could give besides that. However, I could make out two brightly colored yellow dots in the depths. There was a couple of feet of distance between them. It was its eyes. They had to be. It saw me and it was going to come right after me. I kicked hard as my lungs filled with water, desperately reaching up for the surface while I swam as hard as humanly possible. Once I broke the surface with a frantic splash, I spit up any water that entered my mouth and threw my head back to look for the creature. It was gone, vanished from the position it was in when I was thrown into the water. I quickly looked around left and right and behind. Nothing. The entity was no longer in the room at all, and it brought me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in months, not since I landed in the library. I didn't waste any time swimming over to the edge of the pool and pulling myself out with a coughing groan. The entire left side of my body felt as if it had been hit by an SUV, which I guess wasn't too far off. I got to my feet, looking down, and spotted a trail of the creature's blood leading from where my feet were planted to the door and into the hallway adjacent from the natatorium. It retreated, but I didn't let myself get a big head thinking it ran because it was scared of me. I probably just thought I had perished. Regardless, though, I knew it would be back, and I needed to move despite me being drenched and dripping wet. I tried to shake my head to get some of the water out of my hair. All of my clothes were soaked and it felt heavy. The smell of chlorine all over me now. The backpack felt 10 pounds heavier with all the added weight in the water, and I wasn't sure if the notebooks I had taken was any good anymore, but I didn't have any time to check for that at the moment. I paced over to the door and stopped just before actually stepping out to lean forward and looked in both directions. The trail of gooey blood had led down to the right of the hall, so I instinctively went down the left, taking the broom handle with me. My footsteps produced a bit of squelching noise as I made my way down the new section of the school. Part of me considered taking them off in case something heard me, but I knew it was far better leaving them on. The hallway was, as I expected, a narrow rectangular shape with classroom doors on either side. Nothing I hadn't seen before, so I continued on to find a place to sit down and regain myself for just a minute before I resumed wandering. There wasn't much to see in this particular area, just more corridors with lockers, doors, and tiled floors spread about. Although the death-defying adrenaline rush I had earlier, it was a nice change of pace. I kept looking around for any flickering walls or strange doors, as had been established to my only hope to be exit at this point. The expanse didn't seem to abide many rules, but one thing was consistent, that if there was flickering walls were either your worst nightmare or your saving grace. Now that most of my initial shock and existence of dread of the expanse had worn off and mostly turned into general caution, I felt a sense of anger boiling inside me, at both myself, the people who never listened to me, and Tiffany. But according to those agents had said, she had already gotten what she deserved, both for what she did to me and probably countless others. Those armed agents dressed in black were a whole other question. Who were they? What did they want? Who sent them? Was it truly the government or something more sinister? After wandering for who knows how long, I got to a point where I mostly dried off, giving me an opportunity to stop and take the backpack off in the middle of the empty hall. After unzipping it and reaching inside for the notebook, I was generally taken aback at what I saw. It was mostly intact and only slightly wet on both the back and the cover, and the backpack was heavily water-resistant, apparently. I opened the notebook up, rested my back against the wall on my left, and began to document everything that had been taking place since leaving the classroom, all the way up into the chase of the creature and the encounter in the natatorium. It felt beyond cathartic to once again get my story in the writing in a morbid sort of way. There was still an off chance I didn't make it out of here alive for the second time, and I somehow had to prepare myself for the fact that all the people who knew me back in the real world may never see me again. Missing persons cases are always haunting and terrible to endure, especially for close family members of the victims involved. But at least when someone goes missing on Earth, there's a chance you could find them. There are trails they leave behind whether they want to or not. So there's hope, even if it seems hopeless. But when someone goes missing via falling into the expanse, there's nothing. No trails and nearly no evidence. Not if you don't see it happening. Not if you don't see it happen. It made me wonder how many missing persons cases exist solely because of this place. I didn't get much time to ponder on a potential answer, though, as I picked up an on too familiar sound heading my way. The footsteps, the loud, thundering footsteps, and the low, deep breathing. The creature was back and heading my way one last time. It was coming from behind one of the adjacent halls. I slammed the notebook shut and threw it inside the backpack, quickly slipping it up as I put the straps on my shoulders. After which I reached down and hastily snatched the broom handle, gripping it tightly as I stood back up. I'm sure the fact that I smelled like chlorine only made it easier for the creature to track me down. At least I could sniff you out without a nose. I prepared myself for the inevitable encounter, gripping the broom handle as I backed up slowly, waiting for the creature to turn a corner and charge me. The thing wasn't going to leave me alone. It wasn't going to give up and go away. It would keep coming down for me until I took my last breath, and I had grown sick and tired of doing nothing but running and hiding. I needed to defend myself and take a stand. The footsteps and breathing grew more potent, and I held the broom handle behind my back, ready to swing. The creature rounded the corner, roaring in sheer rage and feral aggression. It was an understatement to say that the beast was not happy to see me. I was terrified. I thought about how this would be a potential end, and that this thing would kill me, and that would be it. But as I said, I was done running. It let out another earth-shattering howl before charging at me, but I wasn't foolish enough to try and block him. So instead, I dashed to the side, nearly falling off my feet as I tried to avoid the various attack. The creature doesn't waste time following up. It turns and charges again, throwing out to the left shoulder limb, possessed and slamming me against the wall, my back stinging as I felt the impact of the brick. I quickly took a swing at the creature's head with the broom handle, only briefly causing it to jerk to the side before snapping back as its featureless face stared me down. It raised its other limb in the air, preparing to slam it down on me, so I quickly raised the broom handle and swatted away. I followed up by flipping the handle and shoving it forward, impaling the creatures in the abdomen area. It cried out from the gruesome injury, flailing all its limbs around in an animalistic rage as it swatted at me. I backed up to avoid the blows, nearly falling over in the process. I lunged forward and grabbed onto the broom handle before pushing forward, letting it impale the creature even deeper, avoiding another incoming swat from the beast's limbs. It roars louder than before, and the lack of mouth doing nothing to hold back the ear-shattering volumes it could reach. The entity's blood flowed out from the wound, coating several inches of the handle as it also runs down the body of the creature. I let go and backed up, watching it as it continued to go berserk. But it wasn't done, and it wouldn't go down, not quite yet. It reached forward and yanked the handle out of the wound, the sound both of its pained growls and flesh tearing being coupled together. Once it's out, the entity then throws the handle several yards behind itself, and it lands with a mocking thud on the floor of the hallway, now completely out of reach. The creature then snapped its head at me sideways without a weapon of any kind. I didn't stand a chance. So I did one thing I told myself I was done doing. I ran, wasting no time turning and bolting down the hall in which the creature now was aware of my position. It revealed its true speed, taking off after me as I pumped my legs with adrenaline-induced vigor. The creature practically shook the ground as it chased after me. I fled down the end of the current hall before making a hard left and heading down another, almost identical one. And the creature was hot on my trail, seemingly not slowed down by this wound. I was sweating and panting like a dog as I kept sprinting forward. I thought that I'd be stuck in a mindless chase with this thing, one that would only end in my death once I ran out of stamina. And there's no part of me that was prepared for it, surviving all these kinds of experience in the expanse, only to die like this, and become another missing person case in some random police database. But after looping around one hall and entering what looked to be a second cafeteria, I spotted something that I thought I'd be so happy to see. On the wall at the opposite end of the said cafeteria, there was a section of it that was just a bit darker than the rest and gave a visually apparent flickering effect. Every bone in my body shrieked with both relief and terror as I felt the beast's presence just mere inches behind me. It was catching up. I had never run faster than I did right then and there, even in my previous escapes from the expanse. Humans are capable of some extraordinary things when the threat of death is quite literally looming over them. Once I was a few feet away from the wall, I threw myself forward, not even thinking about what kind of environment I may have landed in. It was disorienting going through a wall at full speed, but not like I had the luxury of being able to slow down. I practically stood across the floor on the other side, and was only given a fraction of a second to take in my surroundings. A complete white, sterile-looking room was with not a single stain on its walls that I could see. The creature had entered the room with an explosive entrance, charging and ramming directly into the wall, facing my back. All the wind immediately leaving my lungs as I desperately heaved for a breath, slumping down to the floor as several objects I didn't visually perceive fell next to me on either side. The monster stood over me while letting out a triumphant cry, raising its left limb and bringing it down with eruptive force and impaling my leg, going clean through my shin and thigh as I screamed at the volume of a jet engine, scarlet red blood coating my socks and staining the floor beneath me. I withered and thrashed around before whipping my head to the right, laying eyes upon a pistol on the floor next to me. I don't know where it came from or how it got there, but all I knew is that it was my saving grace, divine intervention, or whatever you want to call it. I clenched my teeth together so hard while reaching over, I thought they'd crack. I gripped the firearm, not getting a chance to switch the safety off before the creature twisted its limb within my leg, provoking another scream from my lungs. I quickly slid the safety off and pointed the barrel up at the creature's head, pulling the trigger twice and missing each time. The subsequent gunfire inducing it to thrash itself around and drag me along the floor only caused me further agony. I really thought this might be it. This might be the end, but no, I wouldn't go down like I was nothing more than easy prey. I finally come to a stop after all the thrashing and sliding, getting an opportunity to lift the pistol once more. My hand shaking as I aim and quickly pull the trigger. The bang erupts and the bullet tears right through the creature's throat, leaving a gaping hole that spewed out gray blood. The howls, roars, and cries were now gurgled, and its limbs slipped out from my leg, causing me to bleed even more. It was nearly a small pool at that point. The creature's legs began to give out, and it wasn't even focused on me anymore. It just stomped around before falling forward as it steadily bled. Its blood now even mixing with mine as its body landed with a powerful thud. But it took less than a minute for the beast's cry to grow faint while it was on the ground, and soon all the movement ceased. And there it lay, finally dead, no longer able to torment me. But I had a much bigger problem on my hands, one being the fact that I had almost lost enough blood to cover a mattress. I felt lightheaded, and I struggled to stay conscious. Part of me had wondered if I even made it out of the expanse or just entered another section of it. That concern was quickly put to rest, though, as I heard an alarm of all things. It blared into the room like it was coming through a PA system. A robotic female voice announcing the sentence, Level 5 security breach in armory, all possible agents engage. I managed to turn my head to the left with a groan, seeing that the wall I had been slammed into was lined with dozens of firearms, rifles, handguns, you name it. I laid my head flat on the ground and started feeling too heavy as I was slipping into unconsciousness. Outside the supposed door to the room were sets of footsteps, ones you could tell they had on boots and other sort of gear. A man's voice shouted, saying, Come on, move it, this is a breach, damn it! Didn't have time to hear the rest before everything finally went black. I couldn't tell you how long I was out for, but when I awoke, I was in some sort of medical bed with various wires and bandaging on my leg. I assume I had been taken to the hospital, but I don't think that most hospitals will strain your hands down to the armrests of the bed when you have a leg injury. I picked up two different voices in the midst of conversation, both male and female. I looked around the room before the sources, which itself was lined with several beds, with each wall with corresponding sets of medical equipment. My backpack was obviously gone, most likely confiscated by whatever occupied this place. I'm assuming I was in the same building. I darted my eyes to the left, spotting a man and woman of similar height but differing in their attire. The woman was dressed in a suit and tie. Her red hair was styled up in a professional bun. She looked to be in her early 30s. The man, on the other hand, was on the younger side, fitted in black material gear and armed to the teeth with a rifle in his hand. In fact, he was dressed and looked nearly exactly like the angels who had supposedly killed Tiffany and shot at me inside the expanse. Who are you people? What am I doing here? I growled, fighting against my restraints with an effort that proved futile in its results. Seems like the kid's got fight in him, more than the therapist did. He killed that thing we found him with in the armory. Came the man, a slight smirk on his face. Oh, I'm well aware. I reviewed the camera footage, added the woman. He's a fighter. Can you answer my questions or stop pretending like I'm not here? I went on quickly, becoming frustrated. Hey, I'd be a little more grateful to the people who patched you up. Would have been a corpse floating in your own blood if it weren't for us, the woman replies. It's a surprising warmth to her tone, but I didn't fully trust it. Trust me, we're treating you a lot better than Site 12 would. If it were up to Ted, you wouldn't be awake right now to complain, the armed man chimes in. I heard one of these so-called sites, and I assumed this would be one of them. You see, my name is Sandra Locke, and I'm the director of operations around here. As you've seen, our jobs is not the most ordinary, and you've seen firsthand that what we go up against. Hell, you killed a cryptid on your own with the right training and mental conditioning. You could have been seriously trained. Be a seriously trained field agent. Field agent? I thought, what was this? Recruitment of some kid in the shadow military faction that kills beings from mirror dimensions? Had my life truly become this absurd in a matter of months? I was at a loss for words, so instead I stuck to something a bit more tangible and easy for me to comprehend. Where's my backpack and my notebook? I inquired, unsure what Ton had taken to this point, despite me being angry and confused. It's in our possession now. Sandra persists. So what are you going to do with it? Destroy it? Make sure to not leave a trace, so then the world would never know what happened to me? I asked rather rhetorically. No, quite the opposite. We want you to finish it. To write everything that had happened since you landed in the library up to now. No one already believes your story, but it'll raise suspicion if someone's so hell-bent on exposing what everyone else knows, and absurdity all of a sudden vanishes. At least this way anyone who is stupid enough to take a serious interest will think you left according to your own delusion. I laid there silent, not sure how to respond, but I'll be honest, she made a decent point. One that reinforced what I was in denial all this time. I tried to believe everything Tried everything to make people believe in me, and nothing came of it. Not a single person came to my aid, and even those whose very job was that it was this was the first sort of actual hospitality I'd received in months, even if there was a catch to it. Not to mention the people around here had experienced things probably crazier than even me. It had been the comfort of knowing that I'd be surrounded by people who could finally relate to me, even if it was a pretty bureaucratic setting. You've seen things you're not supposed to, Sandra continued. Now, standard protocol would be to terminate you, but you've shown us that you're useful. I would much rather get your help than clean your brains off the floor. I started thinking about my parents, and as much as I'd been angry with them for ignoring my concerns, I still love them. What would they do if I simply upped and vanished again? My parents are probably going to be heading to a file missing persons report for me now. I shot back. You let us take care of that. And no, your parents will not be harmed, but after what you've seen here, we cannot let you make contact with them again. Once again, who are you people? I giggled one last time. You'll learn more about this as we go along, but I think it's pretty clear. We're the people who hunt things like the one you killed, the things that go and bump in the night, monsters, cryptids, whatever you call them. We exterminate them and keep them out of the knowledge of the public. This world would drown in chaos if it knew what truly lurked around every corner. Your therapist, for example, had to be eliminated. She was far too psychotic and would have been in no use for us. And I think we both know you don't exactly mourn her after she tried throwing you into the sharks. She would have drawn too much attention with her quite literally having a door to the expanse, as you call it, right in her office. But you're different. You're indirectly throwing people off the trail, which is why we need you to finish what you started and join us. I can assure you that you will be well compensated for your work. There are many opportunities here at the agency. Wouldn't you like to be able to go back into the expanse one day with a fully armed team and kill everything in there that ever tormented you? And will torment or kill everyone else who ends up there? I'll be honest, her offer was intriguing. Her instincts were telling me to say no, but what choice did I have? Decline and die or accept to become some sort of monster-killing soldier? I'm not sure how much I wanted that kind of life, but I did, however, want to exterminate everything living inside the expanse, and maybe the expanse itself if that was even possible. I wanted to avenge those who didn't make it out like me, those who fell victim to the hell and never lived to tell the tale. Sure, I had been sacrificing my mission of getting the truth out for the people, but if I destroyed the very threat that caused it in the first place, then it wouldn't be necessary. So took a look at Sandra and made probably the worst or best decision of my life. With a long drawn-out exhale, I asked, "When do I start training?" Good Lord. That shit's so funny. It's kind of like Backrooms mixed with like Supernatural, which is like, oh yeah, no, we kill these beings and make sure it stays out of the public. It gets kind of funny. Anyways, that is the ending of this one. I hope you all enjoyed. If you're new to my channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell, so you're notified of videos, which is daily. I love you guys, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.